Aloha. I'm doing kind of a two-part review today. I read 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. It's been in my TBR list for quite a while, and with the movie coming out on, I think it's Lifetime this week or next week, I'm not even sure when it's coming, but I saw that it was coming. So I kind of got a little excited, and I wanted to read the book before the movie came out. The previews I've seen of the movie look a lot more dramatic than the book, which I don't know if that's good or bad. The book, I thought I would gain a lot of wisdom by it. I thought there would be a lot of pithy things, pithy sayings in it to pull out, and what I got was scared. It's not in a ghostly, ooh, kind of scared, but in a real life, oh my God, this could happen, scared. This did happen, scared. In case you don't know the background, Nellie Bly was a reporter at the turn of the century, a female reporter, and she would actually go undercover. Today we call it undercover. At the time they didn't call it that. And she would go do things that, first of all, the normal reporters at the time didn't really do, and second of all, that a lot of the men couldn't do to get this point of view. She was able to go in and infiltrate what it was like for working women in like the garment industry, or one of the cases they cited was women who made boxes, the working girls, what it was like for them, what it was like to be a working girl of the time. And the differences in the class system are so set apart at the time. They still are to some extent, but I think we're a little bit more melded than we were at that time. Maybe not so much between the elite and the non-elite, but the non-elite, the elite and the lower classes, but the kind of in-between is all sort of melded together, whereas before it was very set apart. And so this story, she got herself admitted to Blackwell's Island Insane Asylum in New York. And Blackwell's was, I think they had called it like the worst of the worst. And it doesn't say what year this happened. It says on the 22nd of September, but it doesn't give a year. Okay. So her editor actually asked her if she could have herself committed to an asylum to see what it was really like. And she said sure. And she decided that early on, she would act the part to get into the asylum, but once she got in, she would answer questions truthfully. She would not act insane. She would just observe and take notes as she could and see what happened. She would basically be herself and act normal and see how they treated her. And it was not good. It, the things that they put women, and this is a women's area, so this tends to be geared towards the women that are considered, or were at the time considered, insane. This would have been turn of the century, although I don't know exactly what year. Now, what she did to get herself admitted was merely act worried, act like she was afraid that somebody was going to come after her, act afraid of the people around her, and let's see, what was it? She would, if anybody asked her anything about people, she would say, they all look crazy and I'm afraid of them. There are so many crazy people about and one can never tell what they will do. Then there are so many murders committed and the police never catch the murderers. Let's see, she says, why they look horrible to me, just like crazy women. I am so afraid of them. You know, comments like this, and just keeping to herself and kind of like covering up. And they decided that she was insane enough to go to Blackwell's Island. And let me see if I can go back to, or up to, her whole test to decide whether she was insane or not. The doctor had her put her tongue out. Felt her pulse, listened to the beating of her heart to decide if she was insane. Shone a light in her eyes. Yeah, because apparently this will tell you if, let's see, the pupil of her eyes have been enlarged. Oh no, ever since she came to the home, they have not changed once. That was according to the woman who ran the home. And she told the doctors that she was not ill. She had never been ill. She was nearsighted. That's why her pupils were enlarged. And she kept telling them, they kept telling her, she said she had lost her trunks, her luggage. And so they kept telling her, okay, we'll take you to find your luggage. And then they would take her to the police station. And then they would say, okay, it's not here. We have to go to this other place to find the luggage. And then they would take her to the place where they checked her to see if she was insane or not. And then she would say, well, I just want my luggage. Okay, we'll take you over here to find it. And then they put her on a boat to Blackwell Island. You know, they never told her what they were doing. They never explained anything to her. She knew, of course, what was going on, but they treated her as if she didn't have a clue and if she wouldn't understand. So they put her on a boat to Bellevue. First they took her to Bellevue Hospital and did the tests there. And I think we've pretty much all heard of Bellevue. And then the Bellevue, they do the inspection, or Well, that's pretty much what they did, an inspection. And she stayed there for a day or two. And for some reason, people assumed she was from Cuba. And she ran with it. And so, then and I guess she speaks Spanish, or she spoke Spanish, so she was able to go with it on that way. So then the next day they put her off to Blackwell's Island, and it was on a rickety old ferry. They were put like down below. No, they couldn't look out the windows. They had to just sit. It was dirty and smelly. Let's see. And it wasn't until they got to the island that she asked, "What is this place?" And someone said, "Blackwell's Island, an insane place where you'll never get out of." And so, of course, she's happy to be there because this is what she aimed for, but anybody else would not be. And at this point, she's hoping that they'll be able to get her out in a week or 10 days when she was supposed to be gotten out. And they asked, okay, so she's talking to one of the other women that she comes over with, and she asked the woman, "Where are we?" "At the Blackwell's Island Lunatic Asylum." "Are you crazy?" she asked her. "No, but as we have been sent here, we will have to be quiet until we find some means of escape. They will be few, though, if all the doctors, as Dr. Field, refuse to listen to me or give me a chance to prove my sanity." And that was a major problem. They never gave anyone a chance to prove anything. They never asked questions. They just assumed if you were sent there, you were crazy. So why bother asking questions? Why bother finding out if you really were insane? And when I go back, let's see, compare this with a criminal who is given every chance to prove his innocence. Who would not rather be a murderer and take the chance for life than be declared insane without hope of escape? And there was one woman who was German, and nobody could understand her because apparently nobody spoke German, and so she could not explain anything, and so they just threw her in the insane asylum. There was another woman who had been sick, and she went to some friends for help, and they tried to seek help for her, and she ended up in the insane asylum, and she'd just been sick. And they were given like one thin little blanket. In one place that she was in, she had to change floors a couple of times. One floor, they had to take off all their clothes at night, fold them, put them in front of the door, and sleep naked in these freezing cold rooms, because you're talking New York in the wintertime, or actually it was fall at this time of September, late September, early October. By that time in New York, it's getting pretty cold. And you think about the people that are actually there in January through this. And this is at a time when there's not really any heating. They don't heat this place. And then the food they're given is horrible. She's talking about a piece of bread that had, I can't remember, it was a spider in the middle of it. And then no salt on anything. They weren't permitted to salt anything back at an age where everything was salted because that's how they got flavor out of everything. Oh, there it is. She found a spider in her slice, so she did not eat it. And every day they had to sit on a bench and just sit. Hands folded in your lap, and you just sit. And that's how they spent their days. They would go to breakfast, then they would go into this room where they sat on these long wooden benches, and they sat. And you couldn't talk, you couldn't move around, you couldn't get up and walk. You sat until it was time for dinner, and then you went to dinner. Can you imagine living like that? That is, I mean, no wonder these women went insane. And that's what she says. It's how living here is what made women insane. It wasn't that they were insane when they went in, but they were made insane by the conditions. And the nurses and the caretakers would tease them and torment them. They did have these walks, which makes it sound like, oh wow, they're getting out and exercise. They had to walk in a line along a path. They were not allowed to walk out on their own. They could not go out on the grass. They had to stay in a line on the path. And they walked 2 by 2, just and you could not deviate. You couldn't talk to anybody else. It's a hard read in that sense. The words are easy to read, but it's hard to deal with when you think about this really happened. This is happening today in other countries. It's probably happening here in the United States, but we're so bubbled that we don't realize it's happening. This one, let's see, where, what accepting torture would produce insanity quicker than this treatment? Here is a class of women sent to be cured. I would like the expert physicians who are condemning me for my action, which has proven their ability, to take a perfectly sane and healthy woman, shut her up, and make her sit from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. on a straight back benches. Do not allow her to talk or move during these hours. Give her no reading and let her know nothing of the world or its doings. Give her bad food and harsh treatment, and see how long it will take to make her insane. 2 months would make her a mental and physical wreck. I want to see where somewhere it oh, here it starts. Let's see, there was one patient. She said, one morning as I was trying to get breakfast, I grew deathly sick, and 2 officers were called in by the woman of the house, and I was taken to the station house. I was unable to understand their proceedings, and they paid little attention to my story. And that's how she ended up in the insane asylum. There was a young Hebrew woman who spoke so little English that Nellie had to get her story from the nurses. Her husband had put her in the asylum because she had a fondness for other men. Yeah, and I bet he had a fondness for other women, yet he's not in an asylum. Let's see. There was another woman who had been overworking herself and broke down. She had family trouble and was penniless with nowhere to go. She applied to be sent to the poorhouse until she would be able to go back to work, and they sent her there. They got a bath once a week, and it was one bathtub. And, you know, if you were the first one in, you were lucky, I guess, because it was clean, but it was still cold water. And if you were the last one, you got all the dirty water because they never changed the water. If you got soap, you were lucky. And she says there were so many, she names off all these women: Mrs. McCartney, Mary Hughes, Mrs. Louise Shantz. No obvious traces of insanity. They all seem perfectly rational. No fancies. They seem lucid. One woman, she lost her temper. She was a maid, and somebody came, she had just cleaned the floor, the kitchen floor. One of the other house workers came down, got it dirty. She lost her temper. The woman of the house had her thrown into the asylum. And it's like, it just seems like it was too easy to have somebody declared insane. There was no checks and balances. I have watched patients stand and gaze longingly toward the city they in all likelihood will never enter again. It means liberty and life. It seems so near, and yet heaven is not further from hell. So they did the insane asylum, one more. The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in, but once there, it is impossible to get out. So her editor was able to get her out. She spent 10 days pretending to be insane. She then testified in front of a grand jury, and somehow it leaked back to Blackwell's Island. And by the time the grand jury investigated and went out there, they had cleaned things up. The people that she knew were not there anymore. And when she asked about them, they said, oh, she was released. Oh, she, she was sent home. She this and that. There's one, they said they have no record of her. We don't know who she is. And you know how I was saying there was no salt. They weren't allowed salt. Well, when they went, there were big bags of salt in the kitchen, and they all got salt at every meal. And we know that that was not the case previously. Everything was found clean and in good order. All the girls had all the women had blankets. The bread was not hard and stale. It was fresh. They had fruits and vegetables, which they had never gotten before. But the one thing was that, she, after seeing all this, she thought, they're never going to believe me. The grand jury is, with all of this evidence here, they're not going to believe my story. But they did. So, God, it makes me want to cry. On the strength of her story, the committee appropriated $1 million more than was ever given before for the benefit of the insane. So for 10 days, she was able to get these people $1 million more, which at that point in time is a lot of money. I don't know what it translates to today, but that's a lot. I mean, in today's world, $1 million is a lot. So there is one other thing. As I passed a low pavilion where a crowd of helpless lunatics were confined, I read a motto on the wall: "While I live, I hope." The absurdity of it struck me forcibly. I would have liked to put the above... Mess this all up. Let me try again. The absurdity of it struck me forcibly. I would have liked to put above the gates that open to the asylum, "He who enters here leaveth hope behind." And, you know, this story reminds me of when Geraldo Rivera went and did that. He took cameras in and went into the hospital for the mentally ill in Pennsylvania. I forget where it was, New Jersey. It was somewhere back east, but I don't remember where. But I remember that just kind of exploded. It was such a big deal, and the images are horrific on that one. Just people lying in their own excrement and nobody taking care of them, and it was horrible. And so this really, and that was just in the 70s, and not that long ago, when you consider how long ago this was and how far we should have come. So this is just, this is the newspaper articles she wrote. There were, let's see, how many? It looks like there were 17 articles in all, which, I think it was, I don't know if they were weekly or daily at that time, but they caused quite a stir, and the newspapers sold out to the point where she actually had to put them in a book and have the book published. And so that's how we got this. And so I'm really looking forward to the movie. I think it's on Lifetime, and it stars, oh God, what is her name with the little round face? And she did, oh gosh, I can't think of her name. She's becoming very good at these movies. She did Lizzie Borden in a TV movie, and I think it was on Lifetime. Totally spacing on her name, but really looking forward to that. So after the movie comes out, then I'm going to review that and compare it to the book and see how it goes. So view in, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye. Oh, don't forget to, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, hit the like button, and if you have any comments, leave them down below, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.